My name is Aria Flores. I am 31 years old. The night my life cracked in two didn't begin with a fight. It didn't even begin with tears. It began with a dinner table, polished wine glasses, and the sound of my husband's voice sliding through the air like a blade. "She's nothing without me." Lucas said it with a smile, casual, as if he were talking about the weather. His colleagues laughed. Forks clinked against plates. The world carried on as though my marriage hadn't just been stripped bare in front of strangers. I didn't move. My hand froze on the stem of my glass. I kept my lips curved into that polite smile wives are supposed to wear, even when they're bleeding inside. But in my chest something shifted. When we left, the air outside was thick with the smell of summer rain on hot pavement. In the car, Lucas hummed to himself, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. He drove like a man who owned every road, every future. "You handled yourself well," he said, glancing at me, his tone condescending. "I knew you wouldn't make a scene." Dependent, Aria. That's just who you are. Dependent. The word buzzed in my ears like a mosquito that refused to die. I turned my face to the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks. He didn't see the way my hands clenched in my lap, didn't see the storm brewing behind my eyes. When we pulled into the garage, he killed the engine and delivered the final blow. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You are nothing without me. Remember that." He stepped out whistling while I sat there in the silence, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. Inside he went straight to bed, slipping easily into sleep. That's what men like Lucas do. Burn you down and then rest peacefully in the ashes. I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed bedroom door, and felt the weight of every sacrifice I had made for him pressing down on me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went to my small office, where the desk lamp cast a circle of light across the papers scattered there. My work, my ideas, the dreams I'd built before I ever met him. Dreams he had already started stealing. Because lying open on his laptop was a presentation deck with my handwriting turned into typed slides, my research rebranded with his name. And tomorrow, he would stand in front of investors and present it as his own. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened, my hands shook. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, until one day you wake up and realize your life is no longer your own. That night, as Lucas slept peacefully in the room we once called ours, I made myself a silent promise. He may think I am nothing without him, but soon he will learn that I am everything without him. And when I'm done, he won't be part of a single piece of it. Hang on, before I tell you what happened next, make sure you've subscribed and left your thoughts in the comments. This part gets intense. They say betrayal doesn't happen all at once. It's a drip. A slow leak you don't notice until your entire house is flooded. Looking back, I can see the cracks that were already spreading through my marriage to Lucas. I just didn't want to admit they were there. When I first met him, I was 24. He was magnetic, the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone lean closer just to catch his attention. He had the kind of confidence that could sweep you up if you weren't careful. And back then I wasn't careful. He told me I was brilliant, that my ideas were the kind that could change the world. I believed him. He asked about my research late into the night, listened as I rambled on about data, markets, and the designs I was sketching. He made me feel seen, important, needed. But slowly that changed. The first time he cut me off in public, we were at a networking event. I had just started to explain my startup concept to a group of investors when Lucas slid in beside me, arm heavy around my shoulders. "She's being modest," he laughed, talking over me. "We've been working on this together." I froze, the words catching in my throat. But the investors nodded, interested, and Lucas kept talking as though the ideas were his. I told myself it didn't matter, that as long as the dream came to life, who got the credit wasn't important. But inside, a seed of unease planted itself. It wasn't long before those seeds sprouted everywhere. He'd forget to introduce me at meetings. He'd correct me in front of others, twisting my words into his own. He'd tell me I was too emotional, too naive, too dependent on him to navigate the business world alone. Home, the changes were just as sharp. The compliments dwindled into criticisms. You should work out more, Aria. Investors like someone who looks polished. Maybe don't talk so much in meetings. You tend to ramble. You're not cut out for the spotlight. Leave that to me. I told myself marriage was about compromise, about supporting each other's strengths. But what I didn't realize then was that compromise had turned into erasure. The woman I used to be, independent, full of ambition, was fading into the background of my own life. And the worst part, I let it happen. I let him make the big financial decisions. I let him merge our accounts. I let him use my research because I thought we were a team. I thought we meant something. But with Lucas, we was always just another way of saying him. The day I saw my name missing from our company registration was the day my stomach first dropped. I had been listed on the draft documents, co-founder, equal partner. But when the final paperwork came back, Lucas's name stood alone. When I confronted him, he waved it off. It's just easier this way. You don't need the stress, Aria. I'll handle it. You can focus on the creative side. Creative side. Like a child coloring while the adults handled the real business. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I went along, telling myself I was keeping the peace. Telling myself love meant trusting. But love had turned into silence. And silence was the soil where betrayal grew. The moment at that dinner table, Lucas declaring to a room full of men that I was nothing without him, wasn't born out of nowhere. It was the harvest of years of small cuts, small humiliations, small thefts of my voice. And the truth was, I wasn't blameless. I had given him permission with every time I swallowed my anger, every time I looked away from the warning signs. But as I sat alone that night in my office, the documents glowing on his laptop screen like a taunt, I knew this much. I would not stay silent anymore. Because the cracks in our marriage weren't just cracks anymore. They were fractures. And something inside me was already breaking free. The next morning, when Lucas kissed my cheek and left for his big presentation, I watched him go with a steady gaze. He thought he was taking everything from me. He thought I was still under his thumb. But what he didn't know was that I had already started writing my own ending. And it wouldn't include him. Before we move on, take a second to hit subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think so far. The night of the gala was supposed to be my triumph. The company I had spent years building, from scribbles on napkins, from endless late nights hunched over spreadsheets and prototypes, was finally being recognized. Investors were flying in. Press had been invited. The spotlight was ours. Or at least I thought it was. I wore the dress Lucas picked out. Sleek, red, bold. A power color, he said with that salesman's grin. I tried to believe him when he whispered that this was our moment. But the gnawing pit in my stomach wouldn't quiet. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, champagne flutes catching the light. Guests mingled, laughter rising above the string quartet playing in the corner. I smiled, shook hands, answered questions, until the speeches began. And that was when everything unraveled. Lucas walked to the stage, tuxedo sharp, smile charming. He took the microphone with practiced ease. My heart swelled for a moment, waiting for him to call me up, to acknowledge the woman who had built the foundation he was standing on. Instead, his words cut me clean in half. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth, confident, magnetic. "Tonight we celebrate a vision, my vision. Years ago, I saw a gap in the market, and I decided to build something revolutionary. It wasn't easy, but with determination and sacrifice, I turned an idea into what you see before you tonight. My breath caught. My research. My idea." He spoke as if I had never existed. I waited for my name, some mention, a nod. But it never came. He clicked through slides I had created. He showcased prototypes I had designed. He talked about projections I had spent weeks perfecting. And every single "we" had been scrubbed clean, replaced with "I." The room applauded, the sound thundering in my ears. Strangers clapped for him, toasted to him, while I stood frozen at the back of the ballroom, invisible in my own story. I felt the tears prick, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. And then, the final twist of the knife. As the applause died down, Lucas gestured toward the crowd. Of course, I couldn't have done it without my incredible partner in life, Vanessa. Vanessa. The name sliced through me like glass. Heads turned as she stood, smiling, her hand grazing his as she walked to the stage. She was younger, dazzling, draped in a silver gown that shimmered under the lights. My heart stopped. She wasn't an investor. She wasn't an employee. She was the woman Lucas had been seeing behind my back. He slipped his arm around her waist as if it had always been there, as if I had never existed. Gasps rippled through the room. Whispers spread. A few pairs of eyes flicked toward me, pity shining in them like a spotlight I couldn't escape. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. Every humiliation, every stolen idea, every whispered dismissal had been building to this moment, the public erasure of everything I had ever been. When the speech ended, Lucas kissed Vanessa's cheek under the glow of the chandeliers. The cameras flashed. The room applauded again. And in that moment I reached my lowest point. I was nothing. That's what he had told me. Nothing without him. Nothing without his approval, his control. And now the world seemed to agree. I slipped out before the applause had finished. My heels echoed down the marble hallway, each step heavier than the last. In the car I sat trembling, my hands clenched in my lap. Rage warred with grief inside me, tearing me apart. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to burn the entire night to the ground. But all I could do was sit in the silence, tears finally breaking free and streaking my face. 4 days afterward, I barely moved. I stayed curled on the couch, curtains drawn, food untouched. The humiliation replayed in my mind like a cruel film reel. His words, their laughter, the way the room applauded while I crumbled. I had reached the bottom. The lowest place I had ever known. But even in the darkness, something small, something sharp began to take root. Because if Lucas thought this was my ending, he was wrong. The woman he had humiliated wasn't gone. She was waiting. And when she rose, she would not rise quietly. The betrayal was complete. Now it was time to plan the revenge. Before we go any further, click subscribe and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in my shoes? The humiliation of that night clung to me like smoke. For weeks, I lived in a haze. Curtains drawn, phone silenced, blinds closed against the world. I replayed the scene over and over in my mind. Lucas on stage, Vanessa glowing at his side, my name erased as if I had never existed. Each replay was a fresh wound, a new twist of the knife. But in that darkness, something shifted. The grief hardened into something colder, sharper. Rage was no longer a fire that consumed me. It was a blade I began to sharpen. I was not nothing. And I was going to prove it. The first step was survival. I dragged myself off the couch, showered, put on clean clothes. Small acts, but each one felt like a rebellion against the part of me that wanted to disappear. I opened my laptop again, staring at the files Lucas had stolen. My ideas, my designs, My years of work. They weren't his. They were mine. And I would take them back. I reached out to an old college friend, Marissa, who now worked at a law firm. My voice shook as I explained, but she didn't flinch. "Aria," she said firmly, "if he presented your intellectual property without your consent, we can build a case. He may have erased your name in public, but on paper, on record, that's yours." Hope flickered. Faint but alive. The second step was information. While Lucas flaunted his new empire in glossy press interviews and Instagram posts with Vanessa at his side, I stayed quiet, watching, listening. Every boast he made, every contract he bragged about signing, I logged it. Screenshots, emails, recordings. Piece by piece, I built a record not of his success, but of his theft. It wasn't easy. My hands trembled every time I heard his voice. But the more I uncovered, the more the fear turned into fuel. I discovered he hadn't just stolen my work. He had overpromised to investors, inflated numbers, hidden debts. The cracks were there, just beneath the surface, waiting for pressure to make them split wide open. The third step was patience. This was the hardest part. Every fiber of me wanted to storm into his office, to scream the truth, to tear down the walls of his illusion in one brutal moment. But Marissa reminded me, "You don't just want to hurt him, Aria. You want to end him. Permanently. That takes time." So I waited. I took temp jobs to keep myself afloat, sitting at desks where no one knew me, filing papers by day and plotting by night. I grew stronger, steadier. Each paycheck, each bill paid, was proof I wasn't dependent on him, that I could rebuild. And all the while I planned. I drafted a new proposal, fresh, sharper, bolder than the one Lucas had stolen. This time I didn't just build a company. I built a weapon. Every flaw in his model, every lie he told investors, I turned into an opportunity for myself. The first time I pitched it, sitting across from a skeptical boardroom, my palms were damp. But when I finished, when I showed them the numbers, the designs, the vision, they leaned forward. One of them even smiled. "Why haven't we heard your name before?" one asked. I forced a calm smile. Because until now, someone else was using it. Step by step, piece by piece, I built my own empire. Not in his shadow, but beside it, ready to eclipse him. But revenge isn't just about winning. It's about making them lose. And as I signed my first major deal, one that would pull his biggest investor out from under him, I knew the time for patience was ending. Lucas had humiliated me in public, erased me in public. So that was exactly where I would destroy him. I closed the contract, pen trembling in my hand, and whispered to myself, "He thought I was nothing. Soon he'll learn I am everything he fears." The stage was set. And when the curtain rose again, it would be for his downfall. The night of Lucas's keynote was almost identical to the one that had broken me. Another stage. Another auditorium filled with investors, journalists, and ambitious strangers hungry for inspiration. Another spotlight waiting to shine on the man who had stolen everything from me. Only this time I wasn't in the shadows. I stood backstage, calm in a black dress that fit me like armor, my hair pinned back in a way that sharpened every angle of my face. My hands didn't tremble. My heart didn't falter. Because I wasn't here as a victim anymore. I was here as the storm. Lucas strutted onto the stage, Vanessa glittering at his side, their smiles wide and false. The audience clapped, flashes went off, and I watched them bask in the applause they believed belonged to them. He began his speech, his voice dripping with confidence. He spoke of innovation, of vision, of building something from nothing. Words I had once whispered late at night, scribbled in notebooks he had stolen. And then the screens behind him shifted. Not to his slides. Mine. Every image, every file, every draft with my name watermarked at the bottom, projected 20 feet high for the world to see. The audience murmured. Few gasped. Lucas froze, his words strangling mid-sentence. Vanessa's smile cracked. And then I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight found me, and for the first time in months, I felt its warmth not as an accusation but as justice. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady, carrying across the stunned silence. "My name is Aria Hale. You don't know me because Lucas Reynolds erased me. These ideas, these designs, this vision, they were mine, stolen, presented as his own." The crowd erupted. The camera flashes, the sound of hundreds of phones recording. I didn't look at Lucas. Not yet. I let the silence between us stretch, a noose tightening around his neck. For months I stayed silent. I let him take my work, my name, my dignity. But tonight I won't. Tonight you'll hear the truth. Tonight the world will know exactly who built this, and who destroyed it. Lucas tried to interrupt, his voice high and desperate. "She's lying." But Marissa, my lawyer, stood in the front row, holding up a thick folder. "We have records," she called out, her voice cutting through his panic. "Emails, draft, proof of theft and fraud. Legal action has already been filed." The screen shifted again, this time showing receipts of Lucas's doctored numbers, his hidden debts, his lies to investors. Each slide another nail in the coffin of his empire. The room dissolved into chaos. Investors rose from their seats, shouting. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, pens flying. Vanessa slipped quietly toward the wings, her glittering dress disappearing like a coward's shadow. And Lucas. He stood frozen in the spotlight, sweat gleaming on his forehead, his mouth opening and closing like a drowning man. I turned to him then, finally meeting his eyes. "Cold, steady. You told me I was nothing without you," I said, my voice quiet but lethal. "But look at you now. Stripped bare. And I'm the one standing here, not beside you but above you." The audience roared, half with outrage, half with shock, the sound rising like thunder. I stepped off the stage, my heels clicking against the polished floor, each step the sound of a final verdict. I didn't need to stay for the end. His downfall had already begun, and the world was watching. By the next morning the headlines were everywhere. Tech darling exposed as fraud. Aria Hale, the woman behind the vision. Lucas Reynolds' empire collapses overnight. Investors pulled out. Lawsuits piled in. And Lucas's name, once shining, turned to ash. As for me, I stood in a new office weeks later, my own name etched in gold across the door. My company, my vision, my life. I didn't forgive. I didn't reconcile. I didn't soften. Because justice wasn't about kindness. It was about balance. And the scales had finally tipped. When people asked me what it felt like to destroy the man who had tried to erase me, I only smiled and said, "He told me I was nothing. But now he's the one who doesn't exist." But today I stand taller than ever, with my own company, my own name, and a life he will never be part of. Justice wasn't soft. It wasn't merciful. It was harsh, public, and permanent. And when people ask me how it feels to have destroyed the man who once mocked me, I tell them this. He was right about one thing. I am nothing without him. Nothing but free, powerful, and untouchable.